My family said I owed them everything, so they robbed me, trashed my car, smeared my name at work, and bragged about it until I had them arrested. When I was 7 years old, I told my mom that when I turned 18, I wanted to live in a huge mansion made of gold. Honey, people who move out are bad people, and if you ever do that, mommy and daddy will be very upset. I nodded like it was the most reasonable thing in the world and promised to live with her forever, and I had every intention of keeping that promise until I turned 20 and found myself sharing a room with my 2 baby nephews. I was waking up almost every night at 3 a.m. to crying, screaming, and even vomiting. So, for the first time since I was 7, I brought up the idea of moving out. I told her I could live with a friend, and I would pay for everything. She gasped loudly. It was so dramatic that you could have sworn she just found out she had 1 day left to live. How dare you? I'm not even going to entertain this. Don't even think about asking your father. You see, to my parents, moving out is a sign of betrayal. They basically think it means you're ungrateful and a horrible child. So I figured that if I proved my loyalty and then asked them again, everything would be fine. So I started working an extra 20 hours a week and giving them half of every paycheck. Still not convinced. I did all the grocery shopping, cooking, and cleaning for them. Still not convinced. I even took time off of college and work to help take care of all 7 kids living in the house. And guess what? They still weren't convinced of my gratitude and loyalty. They never even gave me a thank you for any of it. And by the time I was 23 and graduating college, I was the one who had had enough. Because not only did they not show up, but as soon as I got home, the first thing they did was make fun of me. You see, I forgot to mention their unconventional morals stretched beyond just not moving out. It's any achievement. Even convincing them to let me finish high school was a battle. So when they started calling me an office rat or Mr. Fancy Degree, I spent the night asking my buddies if they were looking for a roommate. Thankfully, one of them was, and I told my mom. She didn't say anything, just crossed her arms and walked away. Well, I moved out that same day, and I never heard from my family again, and I didn't reach out either. I wanted to make sure I had a stable life first, and it wasn't until a few months ago when I turned 31 that I finally considered reaching out, because in that time, I had gotten an extremely beautiful and amazing fiancé, a nice car, and a very solid career, which meant I had enough money to not only pay off my parents' mortgage, but also to help contribute to a new house for them and the kids. As I wrote out the check for $200K, I felt a sense of pride, because I was finally able to give back to my family, show them how much I love them, and that's when I did something extremely crazy and reckless. I invited my entire family over for dinner. It was via email, and was the first time we had spoken in 8 years. My mom replied almost instantly, and said they'd all be attending. My heart jumped. I really thought this was going to be the moment our relationship is rebuilt. In the days leading up to it, I did everything I could to make sure it was perfect. I planned on cooking 3 homemade recipes, and even set up a little play area for the little ones. I didn't want to get my hopes too high, but as I set up, I couldn't stop fantasizing about what they might say. We loved you all along. We missed you so much, were all things I longed to hear. So when the moment finally came, and they were at my doorstep, me and my fiancée, Ella, happily welcomed them inside. My 2 nephews came, along with my 4 nieces, 3 aunts, uncle, and my parents. Aside from some small talk, the house was pretty much silent for a while. I felt so awkward that I broke the silence by taking out the fat check and handing it to them. This is for your mortgage, and some extra to help you in the future. Oh wow, my mom was the first to speak. So you think you can just abandon your family and come back with some money like nothing ever happened? I felt that familiar pain again, like a wound being poked. I'm sorry, Mom. Sorry? This time it was my dad who interrupted. Oh yeah, I'm the most ungrateful and worthless piece of crap, but hey, at least I'm sorry. He said it in a sarcastic tone to mock me. I swear I was about to start crying, but then my mom chimed back in to change the topic. She pointed to Ella before saying, I hope you're not actually with this sorry excuse for a woman. I stared at the check in my mother's hand. The smell of the freshly cooked dinners hit my nostrils. Suddenly, all my sadness and guilt was replaced with a deep, unearthing rage. I grabbed Ella's hand, shoved the adults out of the way, and walked out. We got in the car and drove around the corner. Ella wasn't upset either. In fact, she was just as angry as me. We didn't say much, but she knew I was done with them. It had been building for years. Today was just the breaking point, my reality check. I knew I couldn't ignore it, that I had to do something. I couldn't finish the story in this short video, but it gets intense. They're still in our apartment, Ella finally said, checking her phone. Your mom's texting me now. She showed me the screen. My mom had somehow got Ella's number and was sending a barrage of messages, each one nastier than the last. I called Michael, explained the situation, and he offered to let us crash at his place for the night. We stopped at a convenience store for toothbrushes and drove to his apartment across town. The whole time, my phone was blowing up with texts and calls from various family members. When we got to Michael's, I finally looked at the messages. My mom was demanding I come back immediately. My dad was threatening to take what they were owed from our apartment if I didn't return. My aunt was calling me selfish and ungrateful. They were all acting like I was the villain in this story. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep on Michael's couch, with Ella curled up beside me. Around 3 a.m., Michael's neighbor knocked on the door. He looked concerned. Hey man, aren't you staying in building 1400? I just drove past and there were people carrying stuff out to a truck. I sat bolt upright. They were robbing us. My own family was robbing our apartment. Michael offered to drive us back, but I was worried about confrontation turning violent. Instead, I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation calmly. Unauthorized people were removing items from my residence. I didn't mention they were family. We arrived back at our apartment complex just as a patrol car pulled up. I could see my parents' old minivan and my uncle's pickup truck parked out front, both loaded with what looked like our electronics and Ella's art collection. My dad was carrying our TV down the stairs when he spotted me. For a split second, I saw something I'd never seen on his face before. Shame. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar scowl. "There he is, officer," my mom shouted from behind him. "Our son who stole our money and is now trying to get us arrested." The police officer looked between us, clearly trying to piece together a messy family situation. "Sir, is this your residence?" he asked me. "Yes, it is. I have ID with this address, and the lease is in my name." I pulled out my wallet. While the officer was checking my ID, my mom stormed up to me. "You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, we raised you, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you repay us." Ella stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're currently stealing from our home. I don't think you're in a position to talk about gratitude." My mom turned her rage on Ella. You're the reason he abandoned his family. You've poisoned him against us." I stood between them. "Ella and I have been together 4 years. I left home 8 years ago because you made it impossible to stay. This has nothing to do with her." The officer had heard enough. "All right, I need everyone to calm down. Sir, since this is your residence, do you want to press charges for theft?" I looked at my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, but instead had tried to take everything from me. Again, part of me wanted to say yes, to watch them face consequences for once in their lives, but another part knew that would just feed into their narrative of me being the villain. I looked at the officer, then back at my family. My dad still had our TV halfway down the stairs. My mom was glaring at me with pure hatred. My aunts and uncle were frantically trying to shove more of our stuff into their vehicles, and my nephews and nieces were watching it all with wide eyes, their innocent faces reflecting confusion and fear. These kids were learning that this behavior was normal, that family meant taking what you wanted regardless of boundaries or respect. The thought broke my heart. "No," I finally said to the officer, my voice steadier than I expected. "I don't want to press charges, but I do want my property returned and for them to leave." The officer nodded, his expression professional but sympathetic. "You heard him. Put everything back where you found it and then vacate the premises." Immediately, my family erupted in protests. My dad nearly dropped the TV in his anger, fumbling with the bulky screen as his face turned an alarming shade of red. "This isn't over," my mom screamed as they reluctantly started carrying things back upstairs, her voice echoing through the stairwell. "That money is ours. You owe us. After everything we've done for you." It took almost an hour for them to return everything to our apartment, each item placed back with aggressive resentment. The officer stayed the whole time, bless him, standing vigilantly by the door with his arms crossed. When they finally left, he suggested we change our locks immediately. He also recommended we document all our belongings in case they tried something like this again, his years of experience clearly telling him this wasn't the end of the conflict. As soon as the last family member drove away, tires screeching in protest, I collapsed onto our couch, emotionally drained. Ella sat beside me, taking my hand in hers, her touch grounding me in reality. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm sorry I put you through this. You didn't sign up for this level of crazy." Ella apretó mi mano, sus ojos reflejando fuerza y compasión. "This isn't your fault. None of this is. But we need to protect ourselves now." I nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. "They took the check," I realized suddenly, sitting upright. "My mom never gave it back. I saw her stuff it in her purse." "Can you cancel it?" Ella asked, already reaching for her phone. I called my bank immediately, explaining the situation as calmly as I could. Thankfully, they put a stop payment on the check right away. The customer service rep even waived the $30 fee after hearing what happened, her voice softening with sympathy. Small mercies, I guess. We spent the rest of the night taking photos of our belongings and changing all our passwords on every account we could think of. I even called our property manager to get permission to change the locks first thing in the morning, explaining briefly about the family emergency. Ella was amazing through it all, staying calm and focused when I felt like I was falling apart, methodically documenting everything we owned while I made calls. The next morning, we called a locksmith who came and installed new deadbolts, reinforcing the door frame as well for extra security. I was just signing the paperwork, the smell of fresh metal shavings still in the air, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered hesitantly, bracing myself for more family drama. It was my niece, Karma. She was 16 now, the oldest of the kids, with a maturity beyond her years from growing up in that household. "Uncle, I'm sorry about yesterday," she whispered. She sounded like she was trying not to be overheard, her voice barely audible. "Grandma and Grandpa told us all that you were going to give them money for a new house, but then you changed your mind and tried to have them arrested." My heart sank, a fresh wave of hurt washing over me. "That's not what happened, Karma." "I know," she said softly, conviction in her young voice. "I saw everything. They've been talking about this dinner for weeks. Grandma kept saying she was going to get what she deserved from you. They made us all get dressed up and everything." The realization hit me like a truck, the pieces falling into place. They had planned this all along. The quick response to my email invitation, the immediate anger when I gave them the check. They had come with the intention of making me feel guilty enough to hand over money, then twist the narrative to make me the bad guy no matter what happened. The elaborate manipulation made me feel sick. "Karma, where are you now? Are you safe?" I asked, suddenly concerned about her calling me like this, imagining the consequences if she was caught. I'm at school. I borrowed my friend's phone. She paused, a rustling sound suggesting she was moving to somewhere more private. Uncle, they're saying they're going to get that money one way or another. I heard Grandpa talking about your work. Do you work at Palmer Tech? My blood ran cold, a chill running down my spine. Yes, why? They were looking up the address online. Grandpa said something about paying you a visit there. He was on Google Maps looking at pictures of the building. I thanked Karma for the warning and told her to be careful, to delete the call record from her friend's phone. After we hung up, I immediately called my boss. I explained that I was having a family issue, and that if any of my relatives showed up at the office, security should not let them in under any circumstances. My boss was understanding, even offering to let me work from home for a few days, his concern evident. Ella and I decided it would be best to lay low for a while. We ordered groceries for delivery and worked from home, creating a temporary fortress. I was constantly checking the parking lot from our window, half expecting to see my parents' minivan appear at any moment, jumping at every car door that slammed. 3 days passed without incident. I was starting to think maybe Karma had misunderstood, or maybe my parents had just been making empty threats in the heat of the moment. Then Thursday morning, I got a call from HR. Mr. Thomas, we've received some concerning communications about you, said Jessica, the HR director, her normally cheerful voice strained. Would you be able to come in for a meeting today? My stomach dropped, acid rising in my throat. What kind of communications? Jessica hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I'd rather discuss this in person. How's 2 p.m.? I agreed to the meeting, then immediately called my boss, Joseph. He picked up on the first ring. I was just about to call you, he said, sounding stressed. Your parents have been emailing everyone in the company. They're claiming you stole money from them and that you're unstable. They sent screenshots of texts supposedly from you threatening them. It's getting pretty ugly. What? Those are fake. I never sent any threats, I insisted, panic rising in my throat, my hands beginning to shake. I know, Joseph said quickly. Look, HR has to follow protocol here, but I've got your back. Just come in, explain the situation calmly, and bring any evidence you have that these people are, well, crazy? I suggested, a hysterical laugh threatening to escape. Your words, not mine, Joseph replied, but I could hear the sympathy in his voice. I spent the next hour gathering evidence, the police report from when my family tried to rob us, screenshots of the threatening texts they had sent me, and even pulled up my bank statement showing the stopped check for $200,000 that I had tried to give them. I organized everything meticulously, determined to protect my professional reputation. Ella drove me to the office since I was too nervous to drive myself, my legs feeling like jelly. Want me to come in with you? She asked as we pulled into the parking lot, squeezing my knee reassuringly. No, I need to handle this myself, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt, straightening my tie nervously. But thank you. I walked into the HR meeting room at exactly 2 p.m., clutching my folder of evidence. Jessica was there, along with Joseph and someone from legal, a woman I recognized but couldn't name. They had a folder of printouts in front of them, looking solemn. Thank you for coming in, Jessica began formally. We've received multiple emails from people claiming to be your parents. They've made some serious allegations against you, including theft and threatening behavior. As I'm sure you understand, we have to address these claims. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I understand, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to address this. My parents and I have a complicated relationship. I recently offered them financial help, which they took, but then became angry when I wouldn't give them more. Now they're retaliating. Let me show you what actually happened. I went through the entire story, showing them my evidence as I went. They listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, their expressions shifting from concern to understanding. When I finished, there was a long silence, the tension in the room palpable. Well, Jessica finally said, exchanging glances with the others, this is certainly a unique situation, but based on your performance history and the evidence you've provided, we have no reason to doubt your account. Relief washed over me, my shoulders dropping several inches. Thank you. That said, she continued, straightening a paperclip on the table, we need to address the ongoing disruption. These emails are flooding our inboxes and affecting business operations. The legal representative spoke up, her voice crisp and professional. We can send a cease and desist letter to your parents, making it clear that continuing to contact the company will result in legal action. This would come from the company, not from you personally. I nodded gratefully. I think that would be best. Joseph clapped me on the shoulder as we left the meeting, the gesture supportive and reassuring. Don't worry about this affecting your position here. We all have family drama sometimes, though yours is, he trailed off, searching for a diplomatic word. A complete nightmare? I suggested, managing a weak smile. He laughed. Something like that. I thought that would be the end of it. The company sent the cease and desist letter, and the emails stopped abruptly. Ella and I started to relax a little, the constant tension beginning to ease. We even went out for dinner one night, our first time leaving the apartment together in over a week, enjoying a quiet meal at our favorite Italian place. That was when things got even worse. When we got home from dinner, our apartment door was ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. My heart sank as I pushed it open, instinctively moving Ella behind me. The place had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, furniture overturned, everything of value gone, laptops, jewelry, Ella's art collection that she'd spent years curating, even our expensive coffee maker. Oh my God, Ella whispered, stepping gingerly over the mess on the floor, broken glass crunching under her shoes. I immediately called the police, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. While we waited for them to arrive, I checked our bedroom. The mattress had been slashed open, clothes strewn everywhere like confetti. But the worst discovery was on our bathroom mirror, written in what looked like Ella's favorite red lipstick, "You owe us everything." The police arrived quickly, 2 officers carefully documenting the scene. As I was explaining what happened, one of the officers got a call on his radio. He stepped aside to take it, then returned with a grim expression, his partner looking equally concerned. "Sir, was your vehicle a 2019 blue Honda Civic?" he asked, notepad poised. My stomach dropped. "Yes. Why?" "It's been found abandoned about 3 miles from here. Looks like it was deliberately crashed into a tree. The front end is completely smashed in." I felt like I might throw up, bile rising in my throat. They had stolen our car keys from the apartment and destroyed my car out of pure spite, a final act of vengeful destruction. The officer continued, "We've got officers on scene there as well. The vehicle's pretty damaged, but they found something interesting. There's a receipt in the car from a pawn shop dated today, about an hour before you called us." It didn't take long for the police to visit the pawn shop and confirm my suspicions. My parents, uncle, and one aunt had sold most of our valuables there, caught clearly on camera. The security camera footage showed them clear as day, my father even smiling as he pocketed the cash. Between the break-in, car theft, and pawn shop evidence, the police had enough to arrest them for felony charges, but they couldn't find them. My family had apparently skipped town right after pawning our stuff, vanishing like smoke. The next few days were a blur of insurance claims, police reports, and trying to piece our lives back together. Our renter's insurance covered most of the stolen items, but the emotional damage was harder to quantify. Ella was jumpy every time she heard a noise in the hallway, her eyes constantly darting to the door. I couldn't sleep for more than an hour without waking up in a panic, drenched in sweat. A week after the break-in, I got a text from Karma again. "Grandparents staying at Uncle Robert's cabin upstate. They're bragging about what they did. I'm scared." I immediately forwarded the message to the detective handling our case. Within hours, they had dispatched officers to the cabin and arrested my parents, aunt, and uncle. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but short-lived, because now came the hard part, deciding whether to press charges against my own family. The detective explained that with the evidence they had, my family was looking at serious jail time. Part of me wanted that, wanted them to finally face consequences for their actions, but another part of me thought about the kids, especially Karma. What would happen to them if all the adults went to prison? I spent a sleepless night weighing my options, staring at the ceiling as Ella slept fitfully beside me. In the morning, I called the detective. My decision made. "I want to press charges," I said firmly, "but I'm concerned about the children in the household." The detective assured me they would coordinate with Child Protective Services to ensure the kids were taken care of. I also mentioned Karma specifically, explaining how she had tried to warn me. I wanted to make sure she wasn't punished for doing the right thing. The next day, I received a call from a social worker named Barbara. She explained that the children had been temporarily placed in emergency foster care while the situation was assessed. "Karma has asked specifically to speak with you," Barbara said, her voice kind but professional. "Would you be willing to meet with her?" I agreed immediately. Later that afternoon, Barbara brought Karma to a neutral meeting spot, a quiet room at the local community center with comfortable chairs and calming blue walls. When Karma walked in, I barely recognized her. The little girl I remembered had grown into a teenager with tired eyes and hunched shoulders, looking much older than her 16 years. "Hey, Uncle," she said softly, sitting across from me, fidgeting with the sleeve of her oversized sweater. "Hey, Karma, I'm so sorry about all of this." I didn't know what else to say, the words feeling inadequate. She shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for someone so young. "It's not your fault. They've always been like this. I just didn't realize how bad until I got older." She looked down at her hands, picking at a hangnail. "The other kids are scared. They don't understand what's happening. Are they treating you okay? In the foster home?" I asked, leaning forward with concern. "It's fine. The people are nice, but we're split up. Me and Katie are in one home. The younger kids are in another." She looked up at me, a question in her eyes that she seemed afraid to ask, vulnerability shining through her careful composure. "What is it, Karma?" I asked gently. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I was wondering if maybe, I know it's a lot to ask, but maybe you and Ella might consider taking us, or at least some of us, just until things get figured out." The question caught me off guard. I had barely been able to protect myself and Ella from my family. How could I possibly take on the responsibility of caring for children? "I'm not saying forever," Karma added quickly when I didn't immediately respond, words tumbling out nervously. "Just, the little ones keep asking for family, and you're the only good family we have." Her words hit me hard. The only good family we have. Despite everything my parents had done to me, these kids still saw me as family, as good family. The weight of that trust was both overwhelming and humbling. "Let me talk to Ella," I finally said, "and we'd need to talk to Barbara about what's involved. It's not a simple process." Karma nodded, a tiny spark of hope in her eyes, the first brightness I'd seen there today. That evening, I explained everything to Ella. I expected her to be hesitant. After all, we were still dealing with the aftermath of the break-in, and taking in children was a massive responsibility, one we hadn't planned for. "We should do it," she said without hesitation, surprising me completely. "Really? You'd be okay with that?" I asked, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Ella took my hands in hers, her expression resolute. "Those kids need someone stable in their lives, someone who can show them what a healthy family looks like. Who better than us?" I kissed her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this amazing woman I was going to marry. The next day, we met with Barbara to discuss becoming emergency foster parents for the children. The process would be expedited given the circumstances, but we'd still need to complete background checks, home inspections, and training. It would be at least a couple of weeks before any of the children could potentially be placed with us. In the meantime, my parents' court date was approaching. The prosecutor had reached out to discuss my testimony. The evidence against my family was overwhelming. Security footage, fingerprints, the pawned items, the crashed car, and my testimony. They were facing significant jail time. 2 days before the court date, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? Don't testify. It was my father's voice, low and threatening. You testify against us, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. My hand tightened around the phone. Are you threatening me? Because that's another charge they can add to your list. It's not a threat. It's a promise, he growled. You think you know everything? You have no idea what we're capable of. Actually, I think I have a pretty good idea now, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Theft, destruction of property, harassment, breaking and entering. What else am I missing? There was a pause. Then he said something that chilled me to the bone. Ask Ella about Portland. Ask her what really happened there. The line went dead. I stared at my phone in confusion. Ella had lived in Portland for a year before we met. She'd mentioned it was a difficult time in her life, but hadn't gone into details, and I hadn't pushed. When Ella got home from work that evening, I told her about my father's call. Her face went pale when I mentioned Portland. What did he mean, Ella? What happened in Portland? She sat down heavily on our couch. I don't know how they could possibly know about that. She took a deep breath. I had a mental health crisis when I lived there. I was hospitalized for a while. It's not something I talk about because I'm still ashamed of how bad things got. I sat beside her, taking her hand. You have nothing to be ashamed of. But how could my parents know about this? I have no idea, she whispered. It's not public information. The only people who know are my parents and my old therapist. A horrible thought occurred to me. My parents mentioned looking me up online after I left. What if they've been stalking me, and by extension you, all these years? What if they contacted your family somehow? Ella's eyes widened. My mom would never, but my dad might. He never approved of me moving away from home. He's still pretty traditional in some ways. I pulled out my phone and dialed Ella's mom's number. She picked up on the third ring. Hello? Thomas? Is everything okay? She sounded concerned. Ella and I usually called her together on Sundays. Hi, Mrs. Johnson. Quick question. Has anyone contacted you recently asking about Ella? Specifically about her time in Portland? There was a pause. Actually, yes. A woman called about a month ago claiming to be doing a background check for a job Ella had applied for. She asked some very personal questions. I refused to answer and told her to contact Ella directly. My heart sank. Did she say her name? Let me think. I believe she said her name was Karen, my aunt's name. They had been planning this for weeks, gathering ammunition to use against us if things went south. I explained the situation to Ella's mom, who was horrified. She promised to call Ella's father and find out if he had been contacted as well. When I hung up, Ella was shaking. They're trying to use my mental health history against me? To what end? To discredit us both, I realized. If they can paint you as unstable and me as someone who enabled your instability, they might think they can create reasonable doubt about our version of events. Ella's expression hardened. Well, it won't work. I'm not ashamed of getting help when I needed it, and I have years of stable employment and references who can vouch for my character. I pulled her into a hug. We're not letting them win. Not this time. The court date arrived faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if my parents somehow convinced the judge they were innocent? What if they managed to twist things around and make me look like the bad guy? Ella must have sensed my anxiety because she rolled over at 3 a.m. and just held me until I finally dozed off. We arrived at the courthouse early, me in the only suit I owned, and Ella looking professional in a simple blue dress. Our lawyer, Sarah, met us in the lobby. We'd hired her using most of our remaining savings because we knew my family would try every dirty trick possible. Remember, Sarah said as we walked toward the courtroom, stick to the facts. Don't let them provoke an emotional response. That's exactly what they want. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. When my parents were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits, I almost didn't recognize them. My dad looked 10 years older, his face gaunt. My mom's hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual perfect styling. They both glared at me with so much hatred, I had to look away. My aunt and uncle were there too, sitting behind their lawyer, whispering frantically. When they spotted me, my aunt made a slashing motion across her throat. Real, mature. The proceedings started, and I tried to focus on the judge's words instead of the burning stares from my family. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand on legs that felt like jelly. After being sworn in, I took a deep breath and told my story, keeping my voice as steady as possible. I described finding my apartment ransacked, the threatening message on the mirror, my destroyed car. I explained the years of emotional abuse, the manipulation, the way they'd tried to isolate me from everyone. I even mentioned how they'd tried to dig up dirt on Ella. My parents' lawyer tried to paint me as ungrateful and money-obsessed. He suggested I was the one who had demanded money from them, not the other way around. When he brought up Ella's hospitalization in Portland, Sarah objected immediately. The judge sustained it, giving my parents' lawyer a stern warning about relevance. When it was my parents' turn to testify, my mom put on an Oscar-worthy performance. She cried about how I'd abandoned the family, how she'd sacrificed everything for me. My dad claimed they only took what was rightfully theirs after I'd promised them money and then changed my mind. But their story had too many holes. The security footage from the pawn shop clearly showed them selling our belongings. The handwriting analysis matched my mom to the lipstick message on our mirror. and their previous harassment of my workplace had been well documented. After what felt like an eternity, the judge announced his decision. My parents, aunt, and uncle were found guilty on all counts. He sentenced them each to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. They were also ordered to pay restitution for everything they'd stolen and damaged. My mom screamed when the sentence was read, lunging toward me until the bailiff restrained her. "This is your fault," she shrieked as they led her away. "You've ruined this family." I sat there frozen until the courtroom had cleared out. Ella apretó mi mano, trayéndome de vuelta a la realidad. "It's over," she whispered. But it wasn't quite over. We still had the kids to think about. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, home inspections, and foster parent classes. We moved to a larger apartment with 3 bedrooms and started preparing for the children. Karma would come first, then hopefully the younger ones once we got settled. Barbara, the social worker, was amazing through the whole process. She fast-tracked our application and helped us navigate the complex system. When she told us we'd been approved to take Karma, I nearly cried with relief. The day Karma moved in was both terrifying and wonderful. She didn't have much, just 2 duffel bags of clothes and a backpack with some books. When she walked into her new room, which Ella had painted light purple and decorated with fairy lights, she just stood there staring. "Is it okay?" I asked nervously. "We can change it if you don't like it." Karma turned to us, her eyes watery. "No one's ever given me my own room before." Those first few weeks weren't easy. Karma had nightmares almost every night. She was jumpy around loud noises and apologized constantly for the smallest things, taking too long in the bathroom, eating too much at dinner, leaving a cup on the coffee table. It broke my heart to see how conditioned she was to expect punishment for normal human needs. Ella was incredible with her. She showed infinite patience, gently reassuring Karma that she wasn't in trouble, that she was safe here. Slowly, Karma started to relax. She even smiled occasionally, a small, hesitant thing that lit up her whole face. A month after Karma moved in, Barbara called with good news. They were ready to place 2 more children with us, Katie, who was 10, and Mason, who was 7. The youngest 2 would remain in their current foster home for now, as they were doing well there and had bonded with the family. Katie and Mason arrived on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Katie was serious and watchful, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Mason hid behind her at first, peeking out occasionally with curious eyes, but by dinner time, he was chattering away about dinosaurs, his earlier shyness forgotten. That night, after the kids were asleep, or pretending to be, I could hear Katie whispering to Mason through the wall. Ella and I collapsed onto our bed, exhausted, but happy. "We're really doing this," I said, staring at the ceiling in disbelief. "Ella se apoyó en un codo. Do you regret it?" I thought about dinner earlier, how Karma had helped set the table without being asked, how Katie had carefully cut Mason's chicken into bite-sized pieces, how Mason had declared my mediocre spaghetti the bestest ever. I thought about the thank you note Katie had shyly handed me, written in careful block letters. "Not for a second," I answered honestly. The months passed in a blur of school runs, homework help, and doctor appointments. There were difficult days, like when Mason had a complete meltdown in the grocery store, or when Katie refused to speak for 3 days after a phone call with a social worker. But there were amazing moments too. Karma getting an A on her history project, Mason losing his first tooth, Katie finally calling our apartment home. 6 months after the kids moved in, we received a notice that my parents were eligible for their first parole hearing. The thought of them being released sent me into a panic spiral. What if they came after us again? What if they tried to take the kids? Sarah, our lawyer, helped us file for a permanent restraining order against my entire family. She also connected us with a family court attorney to discuss more permanent custody arrangements for the children. The goal was still family reunification according to the system, but given the circumstances, there was a strong case for terminating my parents' parental rights. The day of the parole hearing arrived. I decided to attend, despite Ella's concerns, leaving her home with the kids. I needed to face my family one more time, to make sure they understood I wasn't backing down. The prison meeting room was cold and sterile. My parents shuffled in wearing handcuffs, looking smaller somehow. My mom's eyes widened when she saw me, a confusing mix of emotions crossing her face. During the hearing, I spoke about my concerns for the children's safety if my parents were released. I described the ongoing therapy the kids needed to deal with the trauma they'd experienced. The parole board listened attentively, taking notes. When it was my parents' turn to speak, my dad went first. He gave a rehearsed-sounding apology, talking about anger management classes he'd taken in prison. But there was no real remorse in his voice, just calculation. My mom was different. She looked directly at me as she spoke. "I've had a lot of time to think in here," she said, her voice hoarse. "I've realized I don't know how to love properly. I never learned it from my own parents. I thought love meant possession, control. I thought if my children left me, it meant they didn't love me." I stared at her, waiting for the manipulation, the guilt trip, but it didn't come. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I don't deserve it, but I want you to know I understand now what I did wrong. And her voice broke, "I hope those children are happy with you, happier than they ever were with me." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the script I'd expected. For a brief moment, I saw a glimpse of what might have been if she'd gotten help decades ago, but it was too late now. Too much damage had been done. The parole board denied their release, citing the seriousness of their crimes and ongoing safety concerns. They would be eligible to apply again in 6 months. As they were led away, my mom looked back at me one last time. I nodded slightly, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Then they were gone. I drove home feeling strangely empty, like I'd finally put down a heavy weight I'd been carrying my whole life. When I walked through the door, the apartment was filled with the smell of chocolate chip cookies. Mason ran to me, his face covered in cookie dough, wrapping his sticky arms around my legs. "We're making surprise cookies," he announced proudly. "They were supposed to be a surprise," Karma corrected, rolling her eyes but smiling. Katie appeared from the kitchen, flour in her hair. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, always perceptive. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Actually, I'm better than okay." Ella came out wiping her hands on a dish towel. "How did it go?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "They were denied parole, but honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. They can't hurt us again." That night, after tucking the kids in, Ella and I sat on our small balcony, looking at the stars. Our wedding was a month away, nothing fancy, just a small ceremony with close friends. The kids were thrilled to be part of it. Mason was taking his ring-bearer duties very seriously, practicing walking slowly down our hallway with a pillow. "Do you ever think about how differently things could have turned out?" Ella asked, her head on my shoulder. I thought about the 7-year-old me, promising to live with my parents forever. I thought about the desperate 20-year-old, trying anything to earn their approval. I thought about the $200,000 check I'd nearly given them, thinking it would fix everything. "Yeah," I said, "but then I wouldn't have you. Or the kids. I wouldn't trade this for anything." Ella smiled, taking my hand. Inside, I could hear Karma playing her guitar softly, Katie singing along. Mason had probably snuck out of bed to join them, as he did most nights. It wasn't the gold mansion I dreamed about at 7. It was better. It was home.